Well, Happy New Year's, everybody. I'm so excited that it's 2024. And with that, of course, as every year, we've got lots of changes in the real estate industry, the most significant of which is some fairly significant changes to the agency law. And I'm going to talk about how that benefits you as a buyer and honestly as a seller. There's been, several lawsuits without going into details against the National Association of Realtors, and really the premise of that was that we were not being transparent. The real estate industry in general wasn't being transparent in terms of how brokers got paid. The Northwest MLS had addressed that years ago. So back in 2018, when the lawsuit was filed, we started disclosing how brokers get paid on the listing side and on the selling side. So there was complete transparency to buyers and sellers on how we got paid. So we were very proactive and have been addressing this in Washington State, but other states haven't been doing that, and that has led to some other lawsuits actually still being filed today. There's been a couple of changes with regards to compensation. That's primarily that sellers get to make a choice. So before, there was the notion that there was a set fee, which was actually not really the case, but a perception that there was a set fee when somebody's selling a house. Now, we sit down with sellers and they get to decide what they're going to pay the listing broker who's listing the property, and they get to decide what they pay the selling broker, and that would be the broker that brings the buyer to the property. So there is no set fee, there's no pre-populated fee that's in there. The seller ultimately gets to make the decision about what compensation is going to be paid to both a listing broker and the selling broker. And that is, a change that was incorporated last year with the Northwest MLS, a change that hasn't yet happened in different parts of the country. Yeah, so the wonderful thing is now we are required, every broker is required if they engage in real estate consultation or provide real estate services to a buyer, we are required to have a buyer brokerage agreement signed with that buyer. That can seem scary, it's a legal document, but I think it just elevates our game, it helps our buyers, it elevates everything we do, because my recommendation would be to interview multiple buyers brokers and understand what services they're providing, understand their value proposition, because every broker, like every doctor, like every dentist, like every auto mechanic, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So you better be sure when you're making one of the most important decisions of your life that you hire an experienced broker that you have trust in, that understands the market area in which you're buying a property, and who's going to advocate in your best interest 100% of the time. Some people ask the question about why would I just go with a listing broker, and the short answer is if I'm the listing broker, I will not represent you. So that's called dual agency in the state of Washington. And really, without going into all the details of the whys we don't do it, basically I can't advocate for either party in that situation because I would be injuring potentially the other party. So my practice, it's not everybody's practice, is not to practice dual agency. So that would be a great question to ask of your broker when you're interviewing from a buyer broker's agency perspective, to understand if they do or do not practice dual agency. Even if you do come in, if you wrote an offer on my listing and didn't have representation, I would argue that it's an extraordinarily complex situation, dealing with the contracts, etc. I'm an expert, I do this every day, and still I'm dumbfounded sometimes when something percolates up after 20 years in the business that is a newfound item, a new situation. So certainly having no experience wouldn't be advisable, and nor working with an inexperienced broker, period. Some of the key elements of the new agency law require that you are provided with an agency pamphlet. That's actually been true before, but now the new agency pamphlet is much more user-friendly, more appropriate, and very, very clear in terms of obligations, what we're doing for you as a real estate broker, and most importantly, who do we represent? Are we representing the seller, or are we representing the buyer? Because in former years, that wasn't obvious. Another thing the buyer brokerage agreement defines is the length of time we're going to work together. So that could be a short period of time, that could be a long period of time, depending on needs. It also defines how, if I'm representing you, how I get paid. So how does your agent get paid? So that's going to be clearly defined. It's also defined what if the seller is offering less in terms of a commission, now what? So it's going to define, we're going to have those conversations up front. So it's kind of getting all those hard conversations out, having a conversation about them. We're going to talk about whether or not we practice dual agency, and then very importantly, we're going to talk about whether this is an exclusive or non-exclusive agreement. so when we're looking at an exclusive or a non-exclusive relationship, I'm going to use the analogy of dating. So if you're in an exclusive relationship, you're committed, maybe you're engaged, you're on the path, you're only working with one another or seeing one another, similar in the real estate world. So if we're exclusive, we're working together exclusively. You're not working with other brokers, I'm committed to you, I'm going to be working on your behalf. Conversely, if you're in a non-exclusive agreement, you could work with any brokers. You could sign a number of non-exclusive agreements with different brokers, but that gets super confusing. Because if I show you a home and I'm your non-exclusive broker, but you write that offer with another broker, whoops, you now owe me a commission. So that's kind of a scary thing. You need to be very knowledgeable about what exclusive or non-exclusive means, and I would be very cautious about signing a number of non-exclusive agreements. So our business practice is we will only work exclusively with buyers, meaning that we would ask you to sign an exclusive buyer brokerage agreement. There'll be a little time up front where we're kind of trying each other on for size, but moving forward, we want to know that our buyers are committed to us and that we 100% are committed to our buyers. And we're also going to limit the number of buyers we work with for that reason, so we can continue to provide that incredibly high level of service that we do.